Hey everybody, how's it going? Well, we'll have a fairly short itinerary today, so I want to start us off with the metrics, and then we'll go into some of the conferences we have planned for the year, and then want to open it up to the audience to also suggest some stuff. I know between crypto and the science conferences, we'll need to fill those two for the year. And then one question I wanted to pose, we have Edwin from our team who's been focusing a lot on like getting like the ability to have crypto donations be tax exempt. So just want to get like the feedback from the audience on kind of that process and like, what things would be useful for that. And then we had SK who posted a few more questions in the audience. So we'll get to those as well too. Did you have anything also product wise you wanted to touch on today?
So nothing in particular. Thanks to everybody who gave feedback on the new app last Monday. So we're hard at work on that. I could give like a demo overview of it, but we should have like a basically a Vercel link for folks later this week by Wednesday if they want to play around with it themselves.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. I mean, if you want, we can do a game time decision a little bit later in the call. If you want to do a demo and just like walk people through it, that could be good. And then they can get the link later for anyone who wants to dig into it.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Okay, cool. So we'll get started here with the metrics. So I want to start the community calls now with all of our metrics, especially some of these social ones. So everyone can get a sense for like how we're evolving over the course of the year. So we can go into a slideshow here. And yeah, just wanted to start with pretty much like the beginning of the year. So at the end, December 30th, kind of where our numbers were. These are going to stay the same, of course. And then I'll update these numbers to be the most latest numbers that we have here. The peer review one right now is an estimate. We're pulling down like some of the more specific numbers, but we're roughly up like 30% on the year, which is, I think, pretty good. Roughly around 1,000 peer reviews again since the beginning of the year. So that trajectory, we're looking to about 12,000 reviews by the time the year's over. And that's assuming kind of equivalent pace to how we're pumping out right now. And I know our editors have been doing an exceptional job here and kind of like bearing a lot of like the burden of like processing the papers and looking at all the reviews. So we're hoping to potentially scale up the editor program just a little bit and then hopefully have some other inbound things that might get these numbers a little bit higher so we can reach our kind of 20,000 total goal by the end of the year. So on track, we're on track for about 15,000 between the 3,000 of last year and then the 4,000 or the 12,000 for this year. So we'll be hard at work to get that up. And then all of our social metrics, you can take a look here, are up anywhere from like 6-7% up to about 20% between X and LinkedIn. I want to particularly shout out Research, the main LinkedIn account here. We've had kind of a lot of inbound follows on this. Our peer reviewers are really like hard at work. I mean, sorry, our peer reviewers are hard at work, but so are our editors at doing some more like advocacy outreach. And, one thing that I'll add to the agenda here that we've discussed before is like this idea of an ambassador program. We've had some peer reviewers and like really great scientists who've come on board who have said, hey, I'm interested in the editorial program. We do have limited spots there, but we do want to open up kind of like a science ambassador program type of thing. So there could be, people who are professors who could be part of this all the way to people who are not even scientists. So yeah, that's the gist of it. So if anyone has any other comments, feel free to throw them into the chat below. But I think we're on track for a pretty exciting year. Okay. So the next piece of commentary is around the conferences. So we're planning on doing kind of a blend of crypto conferences as well as science conferences. So right now we are, particularly looking at ETH Denver is the more recent crypto conference. So we're hoping to have a little bit of a booking there and having a side event. So if you're going to be there, please come and say hi. We'll give some more details as the event approaches. If you have kind of any other like speaking engagements or anything like that you'd, like ResearchHub to consider being at, please shoot those over as well too. And we'll do our best to really get the name out there. We're in discussions with the team at Proof of Talk to do like a DeSci section over there. So be on lookout for that. That's a little bit more of a higher profile one in the June time. So feel free to take a look there. And again, if you have any recommendations or thoughts, we're looking to potentially put together a panel. So if there's anyone you want to see at that panel, feel free to send those over as well too. And then from the science side of things, we're going to attend Meta Science, which is at the end of June. That will be out in the UK, as well as a few kind of like peer review and publishing forward ones that we have on our itinerary so far. So I know the audience is like pretty privy to a lot of the crypto conferences that are out there, the big ones, even some of the open science forward ones. So would love to hear some like people in the chat throwing in some different ones, and we can even potentially call you up as well too if you have some you want to brainstorm. And Pat too, if you've got any that you'd like to add to this to the mix, yeah, let me know. And I think actually SK put in here, there's one in Czech Republic in Prague called the Metabolomics Society Conference, and that's going to be also around the June time, June 22 to 26. So it might be worth bundling. I'll put the link in the chat over here if anyone wants to take a look at that. Okay. So next one on the list here is essentially like what are kind of like the impacts from like a user perspective of like donations. So we have this crowdfunding feature, and then ResearchHub Inc. is pretty hard at work at like really revamping this, and hopefully in March time there'll be like a a little bit more like refined version of that. And one of the things we want to try to drive is either large funders or small funders to come in and put their dollars, or rather RSC in this case, towards crowdfunding. And we want to make sure that there's like some kind of benefit that also comes out for those funders. And we've talked about this in the past around the idea of like potentially having NFTs. And one of those things is around tax exemptions. So if somebody's going to donate $50,000 or $100,000 to a project, having that be one of the things that they get. So I'm curious to hear the audience's feedback on like what they feel like, even from someone who could be donating a small amount, is this something that you're looking at? And if not, like what are things that you feel like are missing that's preventing you from wanting to actually donate to some of the research that's out there? And it could be anything from like the inability for research coin, to access research coin. It could be tax exemption. It could be, anything that you feel is missing. And feel free to also put your hand up. We can pull you up here as a panelist. Okay, well, if there's nobody that wants to hop in here, we can probably shoot this out to the Discord to have like another conversation around it. But yeah, so if there's any ideas, throw them in the Discord then. But yeah, we feel okay, we've got Edwin. I think that answers most people don't donate to science. Yeah, I mean, Edwin, maybe I can call you up here and we can have a conversation around like, this kind of premise of donating to science, and maybe that's like the hurdle versus having some kind of actual like return on the conversation when it comes to this. Yeah, give us your thoughts around like kind of this idea of donations for science, and I'll also pull up Dami who put his hand up here.
Well, I mean, I haven't worked in formal academia or anything, but I just figure like pretty simply, I mean, like most individuals don't donate to science, and when they do, there's like a framework for donation. So if you're asking like, people in the audience, what's going to stop them from donating? I mean, I think like the most experience we have with donating to science is just like, at the counter, donating, like rounding up the dollars and donating to like some cancer fund or something like that, right? So I was just saying like, I don't think like these people are going to have the information about what, like, unless we're building something pretty different. But I don't think, most people here are going to have insights that are going to be a game changer from a funding perspective. That's what I thought.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it's like kind of bundling groups of people into like smaller like donators versus like large scale donators. And the idea of like maybe like working with a group or a wallet or something to have like a roundup feature where this like, if you're donating or tipping for like, I don't know, call it $5, 50 cents goes towards like a pool of funds that could then get donated on behalf of them. That might sit well with like people doing smaller transactions versus people who want to do big transactions might care about kind of the question framed, which is like donation, donating, or large funders or something like that.
I think a lot of like when folks donate to science, it's like you do like a walk for life, that Susan G. Komen has put together. And then like at the end of that, you give $150 to Susan G. Komen, or like your dad has prostate cancer and you like give $500 to the Prostate Cancer Society. So I feel like that's a lot of like individual donations. And even like this is mostly just dicking around and having fun. But I searched in Google just quickly individual donations to science. And to kind of like support Edwin's point, most of the links are about donating your body to science more than money. So kind of hilarious. The SEO there has been optimized towards medical school cadavers. So good to know.
But I will say, though, that I think there's actually like a lot of people who would donate to science if designed properly. So just because it doesn't exist, I think it could exist. And I think we're in a pretty good spot to build something like that. So
What I guess, Edwin, what does that look like to you? And then I'll kind of like bring Dami into the mix here of like, if not in like the frame of a donation, which I think fits the mold of like what people are accustomed to, is that like what outside of like a donation might be good that we have like the leverage to pull on research, just so we can think about this more from like a first principles.
I mean, so I think something Dami said to me, because I have a lot of ideas. Something Dami said to me that would be good would be to like have a working group where people can kind of think about this in a more structural way. I think what Research Hub has the advantage of that maybe nobody else who's tried to tackle this problem is we're building an ecosystem, and so we can do incentives that can allow researchers to express how they feel about different kinds of research, not just like the probability of success, but also the importance in a given field. So I think we can use incentives to have researchers curate what they think the best science is. How exactly we do that, I think it would probably be best for, a lot of people to spend time thinking about it. I have ideas, but every idea I have, I've found weaknesses in also. So
Yeah, I think like it could also start with like a V1 of like simple donations that like is digestible. One thing that we've noticed too is like, even from the publishing side of things was, we were doing all these things with paid peer review, and it seemed to like resonate with a few people, but people like generally didn't get it until it was repackaged in a way that like was, identified as a Research Hub journal, and it had the components of all the stuff we were working in just digested in that way, and people really gravitated to it, and it like really stuck. So this balance of like can do some innovative things, but in the way you packaging it in a way maybe that is like a donation that's digestible to people. Yeah, Dami, do you want to hop in?
So yeah, 2 points from my end. First is one that is more related to crypto and donations. So if you guys notice, there is this tokens called Mira recently. So there is this fathers have, a rare disease kind of thing, and he donates regularly. So that's one kind of, use case that we can look into, because it's basically retail kind of donations to crypto. And the other point that I want to raise is, donation to universities. Like we all know, all universities, almost research universities, have this alumni donating to the universities. Like in my case, I know I'm from this Shanghai Jiao Tong University, University of Michigan, and NYU. Like the alumni are like one of the biggest part of their annual budget. It's like in the case of NYU, it's like one of the largest in the world, like the alumni donations to the research budget. In China as well, the Shanghai Jiao Tong University have like one of the biggest part of the external budget from the government is actually from the alumni. And the alumni have their companies. The companies also donates to the all research activities happening in the university. And what they get in return is basically names. They want their names to be associated with their institutions. In other cases, they get names on the library. In other cases, they get names in some lecture hall. In other cases, they get names on something else, the research is building. But at the end of the day, they want this, a share of the prestige, sort of. When the university gets successful with some research because of their help, they want to contribute to that. So most people donate in that case. But I also know some of the cases where they donate to get this tax exemptions, because when they donate big enough amount, you have a huge amount of tax exemptions, and it's something that people consider. But when it goes to retails, the tax exemption part are not that interesting. Mostly they come for the their names, because some of the alumni, like they donate every year in a retail sum, and together 100 millions, then they get several trees. In the trees, they have the names, like a lot of people's name. On the walls, they have these names, because they, a little amount doesn't mean anything, but when aggregated together, it means something. But for them, the name itself is what they get. So we might want to have this kind of, recognition system to people who donate, to be completely, associated with us somehow, helping us to build. And, it's something meaningful for people. When it turns out to be successful, they are part of it.
Yeah, that's a good point, Dami. I think like glorifying it in a way where a user can like have their name associated either with a particular project or associated with like other donors or funders. I know that was one thing, Pat, you're pretty passionate about, is like this idea that, say if there was like some big funder that funded something, like having your name, even if you donated a small amount, alongside that person, to kind of pointing to the idea of that prestige. I know for me, when I get the emails or the messages around like, hey, you were at this university, can you donate money? I kind of get annoyed at like those kind of requests, to be honest. But if it's of the person's volition to do it and there's a venue to do it easily without that kind of ping or request, then I think there could be something there. Yeah, Edwin?
So the point Dami's making is like prestige. Typically, these universities have prestige associated with them, so people donate to have that. So I would think like there's prestige or narratives that people will want to donate to. And I wonder if people here think Research Hubs has something like that already. You know, what just because we're trying to pay peer reviewers or open source how science is done, if we have enough about like what we're trying to build, and we can build a narrative around that can make people want to donate because of what our mission is, and then hopefully in the future could to donate based on prestige.
Yeah, I'm curious if anyone's got thoughts on that, but I do think that like we're building up a reputation of prestige. I've heard this now from a handful of people who I've had conversations with either in person or online around. They have this like sense that like Research Hub as a platform is like has this feeling of credibility. And so I think that the next step past credibility is prestige. So I think we're on the way there. I don't think there's, kind of the critical mass of people yet to like have value on a network. But I think a network effect will build. And once you have that, then I think you can pull on a lot more of these like social prestige things. Javier, I know you put something in the chat and you put your hand up here. So do you want to chime in?
Hey guys, can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can hear you good.
Awesome. Yeah, the first thing that I wanted to mention is just related to what just Dami mentioned and what you mentioned about like the donation and being on top with the other people that donated, like that did the work and all this stuff. And I was wondering if we should have perhaps like some sort of like top 100 of people donating to a certain project instead of like anyone. The reason why I'm mentioning this is like if you have like someone donating maybe like $10,000, and then you have like people donating maybe just $1 because they know they'll be there. I know it's a contribution, but I'm thinking that this could be a value of like people that are actually interested in helping this project rather than just having a name on it, maybe not being like shadowed by thousands and thousands of people that are just trying to maybe have their name on there. Of course, their contribution should be recognized in a certain way, but perhaps for these larger contributions, there should be a little bit more like highlighting of those actual contributions. So that was the first thing that I wanted to mention. And then the other part is just what I typed on the chat. Yeah. And so, because I think like when you're doing science, scientists sometimes just don't know what they're trying to do. Sometimes they're during the planning phase, and then you have a problem, and then you have something specific in your mind, you have thought about it, it's all ready to go. So maybe it has already this potential and it just needs money to be done. And that's when the contribution of these people, it's amazing because it just makes it happen. And so, I think we had discussed this about this, like how good a particular preprint project publication did in terms of like citations and stuff like this, and then give back a little bit of this money to like people donating. But there's also like people that in general could donate to science that doesn't have a particular project in mind. Like, hey, we just want to help science advance. And then Research Hub can be the place where science is advanced by kind of distributing these grants in a more fair, very rigorous way, right? And so I was just thinking that, if we design some sort of like privileges in terms of, I don't know exactly what they could be, to people donating that they could access that normal people maybe could not. I don't want to like kind of like be a gatekeeper or something or anything, but it's more like in terms of kind of giving a way to think in a way that other people could not be benefited by. Maybe that could be an option for people that are just donating in general to help science grow. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I see the kind of idea of like either a direct donation or like a donation to like a bucket. And then like the bucket gets distributed based off of like some metric. And I think like it's important for like Research Hub to have like that mechanism actually be better than the way that donations are done. Because that's like kind of the model now, right? Whereas someone's like, I want to donate to like neuroscience research. I'm going to give this like bulk of funds to like an organization, and then that organization will figure out how to dispense it and distribute it. So yeah, I do think it's like I think a lot of people will probably want to fund that way because they don't know the nuance, but definitely this idea of how do you determine how to better allocate funding compared to like some of the other people that exist now is really important. Dami, I saw you put your hand up. Do you have anything here?
Yeah, there is another flip side of it. We might as well have, the bucket of funds be known to the public. Okay, now we have X number of money available to the public. So people who trying to apply for, grants or something know that, the community pools are of this size now. So if I want to apply something, this one is what's available. So people are not asking $1 million kind of, research projects when they know that the pool is just, 100K. So if we know that an aggregated amount of the donation is currently total to, let's say, X amount. So whatever submissions that go for that pool going to be, smaller than that. So it's good to make this known to public.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Dami. I saw Javier unmuted, so I want to give him a chance. Go for it.
So one extra thing that I was thinking about, what you guys were discussing before about, reputation, then privilege, prestige. I'm thinking that because there are kind of there's a lot of difficulty right now. Maybe in the next 4 years, things are going to be a little bit unpredictable. So we might be a beacon of hope for people that are kind of like maybe losing access to certain funds that were previously promised or distributed that now are going to be canceled and things like this. So I think we could try to think about ways in which ResearchHub can become that beacon of hope, and which ways kind of would benefit more the scientific community. Because I think this could be a good way to let the community know that this is all ResearchHub really wants and cares about, which is just making science advance more. And so if there's a way that we can make this happen in long term, at least, I think this could be something that we can spend some time thinking about.
That's very interesting. I mean, one way we can think of it, like if someone already have this, approval letter from some funding agency, we can sort of accelerate their chances of getting funding.
Oh, interesting. So a combination of this would be if you've got like a green light already from a funding agency, but it's just, much slower turnaround, can you then get like an expedited thumbs up from like the ResearchHub platform to know you can get funding there?
Yes, and also if you had it before and then it's like Javier mentioned, right, canceled or for some other reasons, it's not going through, or phase 1 is approved, phase 2 is not approved for some reason, those kind of things. You had like NSF fund before. This year it's hard because of their change of priority in the NSF funds. Now you want to get when you have this proof that you got NSF fund before, you might get green channel, so to say. So you are faster in the review.
Yeah, I think that's generally like a metric that's used right now when people are looking at funding. It's like, what's your track record been or history of funding? I think that's, I don't know if it's like necessarily like accurate. I've seen a lot of my colleagues who have exceptional proposals who have just never gotten their foot in the door yet. So I think it could be a good idea, but not being cognizant of not like recapitulating some of the kind of problems of distributing funding now will be really important. Okay, I think this has been a pretty good conversation. So it sounds like the tax exemption is definitely going to be more of like a bigger funder person targeting versus another mechanism, either something where you can get your name next to somebody else seems to be pretty promising, or this idea of like a rounding up. And maybe we can start that within our internal platform where it's the idea like maybe if you tip somebody, maybe some of that tip could also go towards a pool. One of the things we were talking about and Malik had proposed to me was this idea that, we're paying up to 3 peer reviewers right now for peer reviews. And so, in theory, having it set to 2 peer reviewers and then taking the extra $150 per manuscript, having like a bulk of those accumulate. And then after, say, 10 manuscripts are paid for peer review, taking the built up, now $1,500 of peer review money and giving it to one of those researchers in an effort to like do the experiment that the peer reviewer had suggested that they do. So if I was a reviewer and I said, hey, you should probably do a follow-up experiment here because that's going to really solidify your claim. Then that pool of funds that's accumulated from what would have been the third reviewer can go to the researcher in an effort to like actually fund the research that they do. So, just another way we can distribute like a bulk of funding. Okay, cool. So,
can I,
yeah, go for it.
just before we kind of leave the issue of funding, I find that like one of the first things is like, what do you want to measure? Like what makes a manuscript or a proposal worth funding over other? And you could try to get signal on like the probability of a given result. You could try to get signal on what like the crowd generally feels about this type of science, and you could take reputation into account. But I'm not saying we're designing this now or whatever, but if people are thinking about, funding and how we can do it better, I think one of the things that people should keep in mind is like, what's the actual signal for what constitutes like what should be funded versus what shouldn't be, and like how would that be measured? Potentially using markets, but not necessarily. So
yeah, good call. Like establish the goal and then work your reverse engineer from the goal.
yeah.
Yeah. Pat, I don't know if you have any ideas here also. I know you've thought about like funding quite a bit. So I'm sure you've got some thoughts as well as maybe even sharing like what the new web app looks like and the funding side of things if you wanted.
Yeah, totally. So I was thinking more about it. I think we shouldn't share the web app yet because it's not ready yet. And if we're going to record this and publish it, like I think it would be better to have it be fully fleshed out. But when it comes to like how do we do signal into like what should get funded, there's two ways that I've thought about this. One is just like whatever the person with the money wants to pay for, so like if you're an individual, you can help provide context to that individual on different funding opportunities, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like whatever that person wants to fund specifically. But when it comes to using markets, the thing that I'm like pretty excited about is sort of the Scott Alexander paradigm of using prediction markets to basically have folks like bet on what hypotheses they think are real or not, and hypotheses that are certain won't gain a lot of traction and volume, but hypotheses that are highly debated will have higher levels of volume. And you can use that basically controversy on the certainty of a hypothesis to help to direct capital towards the most exciting experiment. So I think that's kind of like a very cool market-based incentive way to help to direct capital towards like doing the experiments that can help to provide context on the most exciting hypotheses. But we're still pretty far away from building something like that. Like that's probably at least 6 months away. So I think like in the meantime, it's basically like helping people with money make better decisions. And right now, that's like the person with the money is the NIH kind of, and what they use to make better decisions is like a group of 20 experts, sitting at a hotel conference room. So I think we can at least do better than that by turning the hotel conference room into like an internet chat room where you just get way more voices, more context, and then like put peer review on top of the applications.
That makes a lot of sense, Pat. It makes a lot of sense. It depends, like how you would do that is interesting. Like what I know about how they do it is basically ranked choice voting. So they assign the different applications a score, and then like the crowd kind of decides. You could theoretically do something like that with money, but then obviously like the reputation system would need to be more robust for it to count. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
We'll get it out there and we'll iterate on it. So I think like we should have a funding feature ready to go by the end of Q1, so maybe within a month or so. And then we're going to get it out there, and maybe like curating the different pre-registrations that get funded could be the next thing we think about. So yeah, we're headed in this direction. I think we'll start to think about it more in the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, that's cool. Like kind of like the end state, it sounds like, is having some kind of like markets be kind of the delineator of like what's good versus not good. Because it's like if you're going to put your money where your mouth is, like there's nothing more truthful than that, especially if there's like controversy and you feel confident either way. So I think that's like long term, it sounds like. And then short term is like, hey, are you a funder and you have money and you need help distributing that? Then we're the place to do it because we have a global community of people here. We're not just 10 people in a room.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, Javier, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I love the discussion. I think Pat's point on it, it's very accurate and I like it. And I was just wondering if, because I know we're allowing the community to sort of decide on it, being, open. But I wonder if ResearchHub should have an input on what we consider could be more important in terms of like what type of science kind of more relevant, more important, more impactful, more urgent. Not necessarily be the final deciding reason, but just to have an input. Because I think, we could have, I don't know, input from like bigger organizations, I don't know, the WHO or, other of some of these type of organizations that say, hey, we're kind of needing research on these things, or, or big organizations that have compiled maybe a list of the 10 most pressing issues in our century, things like this. But I think perhaps there could be a way in which the scientific community at ResearchHub and even the ResearchHub team could sort of try to delineate a little bit something about it, because that could make us as well like a scientific, once again, the word beacon. And I don't know, I think it could put us in the good spot, but I know it requires a lot of effort.
Interesting. Yeah, like the idea of like an alley-oop. So like you're alley-ooping, or ResearchHub would alley-oop to the community like a subset of things. I think that's probably how it's going to start off, right? Where it's like there'll be probably some kind of like whitelisted or so projects, and then that can go to like kind of where the community can throw in their donations or their money. But then maybe push that, because I think that's kind of how it's done a little bit, right? Where like one of the big funders or nonprofits is going to say, hey, we have like neuroscience, immunology, specifically, we're focusing on immuno-oncology, and there's like some whitelisted areas. So yeah, just again, I think like the idea of like doing something that's like actually better than like the current system is probably important here, or else someone's going to go with someone who's a lot more reputable, that's been doing it for many more years. Okay. Yeah, thanks guys. So this has been a good convo. So yeah, that's it for at least what we had on the itinerary here. Does anyone else want to hop in with anything? We've got a few more minutes. Otherwise, we can definitely call this one a little bit early here. All right. Okay, everyone. Well, yeah, thanks for chiming in. We've got a few more updates hopefully in the coming weeks here. There's a lot of getting ducks in a row right now. So yeah, hopefully a lot more things to share, especially on like the partnership side. I think will be really exciting. We've been doing just some small updates here. We've been doing a lot of outreach efforts to authors from bioRxiv preprints. So we've kind of established a nice system that helps semi-automate that. So we're really excited to see what the impact of that is on like the APC submissions into the ResearchHub journal, as well as you probably see a lot more spaces from us going forward into the rest of the quarter as well too. A few lined up and then a few more hopefully in the works. So yeah, thanks everyone for hopping in, and then yeah, have a good one. We'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
See y'all.